We are now recording. So good evening, everybody. We're coming to you from the University of Mount Olive in Mount Olive, North Carolina, the United States. Tonight we're going to hear from some folks in the university's MBA program. These four members of that program have completed their MBA curriculum with this course, and so they will be very relieved and pleased when the course is over, as soon as this presentation has been completed, after which they will hopefully anticipate receiving their MBA degrees. So this is the culmination of a great deal of work as well as anticipation. With that, I'm going to turn the meeting over to Mrs. Mallory Kennedy, who will take us along with her teammates through the rest of the presentation. Mallory?
Okay, so first we'll introduce ourselves and then you'll share the screen with the PowerPoint.
Right.
Okay, I'm Mallory Kennedy. I'm from Deep Run. It's about 45 minutes from Mount Olive. And I work in marketing at a community college for higher education.
Who's next?
Okay, Christy?
Yep, Christy Kincaid. I live in Goldsboro, North Carolina. I work at Goldsboro Builder Supply, but under that umbrella is about 20 different companies. So I do a lot of different things, and I'm looking forward to getting this presentation completed.
Niraj?
Yes, my name is Niraj Rosmandari, and I'm from Durham. I work at a financial institution as a financial service representative.
Okay, Jordana?
My name is Jordana Warren Bridgers. I'm from Ayden, North Carolina. I am a area rehab manager for a therapy company.
Boy, what a variety of talent. So, let's see, I need to make sure that I get the right one here because I've got two John Deere presentations on my toolbar and I just got the wrong one. Leave it to me to get the wrong one. So this must be the right one. Okay, how will we begin?
Christy will start us out and then I'll go into the products and services and we'll just go from there.
Okay, Christy?
Yes, okay, so we're going to start off with the history. We're just going to go over some turning points and some administrative heritage. And there on the right, you can see Mr. John Deere. Originally, he started off as a blacksmith in Illinois. And what got him into the tractor business is whenever he was trying to help the farmers respond to some soil problems they were having. And he did that by designing a highly polished steel mold board from a broken saw blade.
He looks like he's got an upset stomach.
And then here you see his son, Mr. Charles Deere. He took over in 1886, right before Mr. John Deere passed. And whenever he took over, he actually helped the company take it to the next level, and it became one of the top makers in the United States. And that's just some of their logos throughout the time. And going over some turning points, in 1837, of course, that's when they were founded. And then in 1863, they launched the Hawkeye riding cultivator, which was huge. And you can see the old historical paper there on the right, showing a picture of it. And I thought this was neat. This is just some more old historical pictures. And there you got the plow on the right and their plant there on the left.
Boy, even then, it was a great big facility.
Yes.
When when Deere moved out into the Midwest, they found that the dirt was called loam. It wasn't called dirt. It was real thick stuff. So it's very hard for to cultivate the land with a regular plow. And what Deere did was come up with something that was sharp enough that it would cut through that. And that was the beginning of the company's success.
So here on the right, you can see the trademark. That's the Leaping Deer trademark that they patented in 1876. And on the bottom, that's the Deere and Menser company that was formed in Illinois that manufactured the planters. This here, is, to me, is a very important picture. This is 1881 when they put together the first electric power plant.
The first plant that had electric lighting.
Correct.
Yeah, and why was that such a big deal?
Well, back in those days, not many plants had that.
Well, none did until Deere did. The significance is that they could, instead of running just one shift, you know, up until that point, the plant closed when the sun went down. Now the plant could run 2 shifts, right? And so productivity really increased, and the absorption of overhead costs could be spread across a much larger amount of production, which means unit costs would go down just because the plant could operate longer. So you're absolutely right. This was quite a revolution, not just in this industry, but in industry generally. So you're certainly correct to say that it's a big deal. It was a big deal.
Yes. So here at the bottom, you see the walking plow. That was 1883. They had several good lines there. The walking plows, the sulkies, cultivators, shovel plows. But I thought that picture was real interesting to see how it was actually made. Here's another big thing. In 1918, that's whenever they entered the tractor business with the Waterloo. That's the gasoline engine there on the bottom. And in 1927, they introduced their first combine. It was a 35 horsepower, number 2. That's going to be the picture on the lower right. And then in 1935, the Model DI tractor, that's the John Deere's first tractor built exclusively for industrial use.
Even at the very first item, look at the size of that combine. Isn't that amazing?
Yeah. Okay, so in 1943, this is where John Deere, they got into making the military tractors, ammunition, aircraft parts during the World War II. And there's a picture there. I'm sorry. Oops. That picture there to me was pretty neat because you can see the military tractor. In 1950, the number 8 cotton picker became the first 2-row self-propelled machine on the market. And then in 1954, they combined the tasks of picking and shelling corn. I'm sorry, it's covered up.
Oh, for the first time. Here, I'll put this down at the bottom. I'm sorry, I didn't realize it was in your way.
It's okay, it just caught me. But and then 1956, they bought majority interest into Heinrich Lahn, which was a German tractor and harvester maker. Mm-hmm.
I think that this number 8 cotton picker, you know, picking 2 rows. Later on, we'll see that they introduced one with 4 rows and then 6 rows. And each time these machines got larger, among other things, it reduced the need for people to walk along with the machine that was doing the cotton picking. And so the productivity went up, cost per unit went down, not just because it was doing greater volume, but because these machines increasingly did the work that people were doing previously, which is why we can now eat corn and consume cotton at a pretty low cost and price.
In 1958, they introduced a new industrial equipment division. That was huge for them. They also introduced a credit company. They're actually one of the biggest finance companies for this type of product. 1963, they had the turf business, which enters into the consumer market with the lawn and garden tractors plus attachments, such as the mowers and the snow blowers. And in 1965, they introduced a 440 skidder that brought operators to a new level of comfort and safety with a canopy, side armor, and leg shields. So the equipment started getting more safe, which was really good.
Mm-hmm.
In 1966, they introduced the first commercially available rollover protective structures for the farm tractors. And in 1972, 4 new Generation 2 tractor models reached the market, which boost the operator safety and comfort with the exclusive sound guard bodies. And then in 1979, we got the first 4-row cotton picker.
Yeah, so now we're from 2 to 4. And if you look at that machine, it's remarkable because it's got 4 rows, but also because you can sort of see that it could probably get along without a lot of extra labor. Very often there's a truck that goes along with it and another person, but higher volume, lower labor, lower cost per unit.
In 1988, a joint venture was formed with a Japanese company, Hitachi, to assemble the excavators in the United States. And then in 1992, John Deere launched the Gator utility vehicle line, and you can see that line at the bottom. And in 1996, they offered the first fully integrated yield mapping package, the Green Star system, for the All Maximizer 9000 series combines. 1998, they acquired Cameco Industries, which is a producer of sugarcane harvesting equipment. And then this was a really big one too. 2000, they acquired Timberjack, which is the world leading producer of forestry equipment. That's why they are now the world leading forestry equipment, because they acquired them. And then in 2009, Deere introduced the first cotton picker that builds round cotton modules on the go.
And at this point, there are no more people required. There's one operator, and this is a mobile factory. And if you look at the machine in the field, you can see that it's pooping out a rolled up bale of cotton with a plastic wrapper on it. You can see more of them lined up nice and neat in the front, but in the picture of the machine, it's actually baled a lot of cotton, picked the cotton, rolled it up, and put a wrapper around it so that even if it rains or they have to wait overnight and there's dew, the cotton won't absorb the moisture, which would impair its quality. And so this is a factory. This is a mobile factory, and quite remarkable in all that it can do. Very expensive. Today, a good one of these will cost you $500,000, but you can generate a whole lot of revenue with this cookie.
In 2014, John Deere's Intelligent Solutions Group further advances productivity by integrating the technology with equipment. And then in 2017, they acquired the Working Group, which is the leading manufacturer worldwide in the road construction industry. And you can see all that equipment down there. and the logistics there. All right, so now we're at the mergers and acquisitions. All of these are important, but I'm just going to hit a couple of them that are really extremely important. And of course, that's going to be the 2000 Timberjack. That's the world's largest producer of the forest harvesting equipment that we talked about. And then the 2017 working group, the leading manufacturer worldwide of the road construction equipment that we talked about. Those two, they really took them to a different level. 2017, the Blue River technology. This is really neat because what that is the see and spray technology, where it enables the growers to reduce the use of herbicides by spraying only where there are weeds. And they're doing this from way in the air. So they're not wasting product, it's saving them money.
Yeah, and also avoids what some people would consider pollution or compromising of drinking water and so forth. I've seen this machine work, and the truth of the matter is, as you might imagine, it's still in development, but if it's working right as a cultivation or a machine goes across the farm and wants to apply herbicides visually, this device is able to distinguish a weed from a plant and put the herbicide on the weed, but not the plant. That takes a lot of artificial intelligence. And depending on where you are geographically and what kind of stuff is in the ground, you can imagine that this is not an exact science yet, but the promise is very encouraging.
Okay, so next we're going to go into the products and services that John Deere offers, as well as their segments that they serve. First would be the lawn and garden. This is truly one of their only like consumer segments that the average consumer like you and I would purchase. These are your lawnmowers that you could pretty much buy at Lowe's or go to your local John Deere store and get like a Gator or utility vehicle or John Deere dealer. And then the tractors and the tools that come along with it. You're fine.
Sorry.
No, you're good. I think this is ag. Hold on, I gotta move my stuff. Yeah, so next will be the agriculture. These are your big tractors, plows, or combines that you see in the field. Like I said, they run year round. They have equipment that can be used for all seasons. And then next would be their construction. This will be touched later on in the BCG matrix. But this is a field that they're growing in with their recent acquisition with the working group. But this can go over for dozers, excavators, skid steers, and just a variety of construction equipment. And then landscaping and grounds care. This would be primarily for like the professional landscapers. This isn't really the John Deere lawnmower that you would find at Lowe's, but more of a higher end, more expensive lawnmower. And then your golf and sports turf. These are different. They have to have a different type of engine on them,
right,
compared to your consumer mowers. And these are used on like say Major League Baseball fields or golf turf or football fields.
Yeah, we've talked about this before. I'll just repeat it for the benefit of the people who are watching the video, even though you guys already know it. But you can look at the picture, probably on the top picture. And what you don't see there is plate steel, the heavy steel that goes into the construction or the agriculture equipment. This is sheet steel. It's much thinner, isn't it? And it can be molded much more easily. It does not have the tracks on it that the other heavy equipment does. It's got regular sort of rubber tires, not real big ones. So and yet this particular item in the picture would be considered a pretty large lawnmower. It's for, maintaining golf courses and parks and things. And Deere makes even smaller ones, of course, for lawnmowers, for consumer. And so these items are of a different category than that great big heavy stuff that has diesel engines and plate steel. This one has a 4-cycle gasoline engine. And so we have these two categories. As I'm sure you're aware, Deere sells lots of ride-on lawnmowers, although I think probably with the coronavirus, they're probably not going to be selling quite as many of them for a while.
Yeah. And this is just kind of add-ons that can be used for your utility vehicles or your tractors. For instance, like a sprayer or an aerator used for everyday equipment that I could buy or a farmer could buy as well.
Those are great pictures.
And then going into forestry, just their basic logging equipment that they would need, track harvesters, swing machines, knuckle boom loaders, and then into your electronic solutions, which will be talked about in just a little bit under technology trends.
Mm-hmm. You can see the picture in the middle is really an extremely important piece of machinery, because as forestry goes on, the foresters have to go deeper and deeper into the forest to get to the big trees. And the real challenge is how do you get the logs when the trees have been cut into logs? How do you get them out to the road so that they can be hauled off? And so a special kind of a machine, that one in the middle, was developed to pick them up and then get them out of the forest. So it's a heavy machine, but it's a truck. But it's not really a truck. It's sort of something in between.
And then next would be your engines and drivetrain. These are different engines that could be used in kind of be swapped out between the equipment. And then they also have marine engines, which is something that I was not aware of. They could be used for commercial or work boats. Mm-hmm. So I think that's kind of cool. And then into the service category, they do have federal and military purchasing contracts. And then for the financial piece, John Deere is technically like a smaller version of a bank, just because the equipment can get up to like $750,000. Your average farmer can't buy that straight out. So they will either lease it or do a farm loan, and they can purchase it through a revolving contract or a line of credit, and they can have an option for farmers to get all of their different loans together on one account, and then their payments can go towards, they can make one payment and it be split up to each account to make it easier.
Okay, so we just threw the snapshot in here. It's the revenue for the 12 months ending January 31st of 2020. It was 38.905 billion at 1.24% increase year over year. Deere's net profit margin as of January 31st of 2020 is 8.41%.
Yeah, after net profit after tax, that's not bad after tax. On the other hand, we can see that the sales are just sort of inching along. 39 billion, of course, pretty big outfit, but not rapid growth, but great profit.
So John Deere's mission is to achieve value for employees, customers, and shareholders by developing innovative and smart customer solutions through technology, service, and conception. The company is committed to its core value, which are integrity, quality, commitment, and innovation. And these four core values are important to their continuous success, which can be found in their products and services.
Yeah. And of course, this comes from the company's literature, right?
Correct. Yes, sir.
As opposed to this.
Right. So here we're going to talk about the Abell's model. So basically, this model is used to define the competitive strategy of the business. So in this section, we're looking at the segments that John Deere serves. There are their customers can be divided under two segments: agriculture and turf, and construction and forestry segment. So farmers, dealers, landscape contractors, they all fall under the agriculture and turf segment, whereas the logging and the construction industry falls under construction and forestry segment. And this is the John Deere that, well, these are the three main segments that John Deere serves: agriculture and turf, construction and forestry, and financial services segment. So these are just the example of the machineries and equipment that they produce. They have machineries, different kinds of machineries and utilities, like different kinds of tractors that falls under agriculture and turf. And they also have loaders, dozers, different kinds of trucks that falls under construction and forestry. But not many people know that they also provide financial services by providing financial
Sure.
help and support for retail purchase of new and used equipment. And this is so this tells us how John Deere can meet the needs of their customers. So by providing energy efficiency products, by heavy steel plate machinery, durable diesel engine, by providing powerful solar machine, and more highway construction, product innovations, and global expansion and product development. And this is the distinctive distinctive competencies. So this is an example of technology and services that John Deere employs to meet their customer needs. For example, they have automation system, product innovations, artificial intelligence, sophisticated metallurgy, excellent customer service, and global expansion.
We saw earlier a statement of John Deere's mission and I think vision from the company's literature. Very often company literature uses words like mission and vision. And if we read this stuff, it makes us like the company because it's part of the company's propaganda. So Derek Abell, an economist in England, decided that what we needed to do was get away from that and be more objective and try to summarize, before we get into strategic planning, the concept of the corporation. And his thought was that you ought to be able to state what the served market is. Although that seems to be a very simple thing, I can tell you that I've worked with a lot of companies in the past, and they thought they served one market. It might have been a great big market, it might have been an elegant market, and so forth. I've even done it in universities. I can remember working with a small college, not this one, but it had a bunch of very highly educated faculty, guys from Harvard and Yale and Princeton and so forth. And they really thought that they were in business to do another Harvard business or Yale, something very esoteric. On the other hand, they were out in the country. It was not an institution that was in an urban area, and the market that they were located in didn't want and really could not benefit from the kind of institution that they wanted it to be. These were folks who wanted to train people to be college graduates and do industrial work and manage companies and so forth, but not necessarily run IBM. Simply because these folks had geared in to what they thought was a good market, they really were not functioning well until they came to grips with the fact that what their market wanted wasn't exactly what they wanted to provide. And that called for a whole change in culture and attitude and, frankly, personnel. and subsequently the institution began to perform better. So at that point then, the question was, well, what is it that the market needs that isn't been provided, whether by that company or just the industry? Frankly, small institutions like Mount Olive and others are trying to come to grips with that right now. Coronavirus has sort of pushed us along that way. And then once we understand what that unmet need is, the next question is, what kind of capabilities do you have to set yourself apart? The phrase, as you look at it on the screen, isn't competencies, it's distinctive competences. What kind of competence can this organization develop that sets it apart from its competition so that it can be a winner? It may be some advanced kind of technology or some particular kind of resource. But it's not enough to know what the unmet need is. The question is, what do you have in order to meet that unmet need? And if you can answer those three questions, then according to Derek Abell, you've got the concept of the corporation. You don't have to answer in all that great a detail, but if you can answer those three questions, now you've got the mission and you can move forward on all three channels and be productive in developing strategy and a plan to accomplish strategic objectives. And it's important, I think, and quite remarkable that at the very outset of strategic planning, many companies just never get through this point. Consequently, they spin their wheels and go off in all sorts of directions. If you can get this concept nailed down, everything else will fall in place. Sorry for that long lecture. I won't do that to you again. I'm going to ask a few questions in the exam about it. And frankly, for anybody out there in cyberspace who's attending this, that's a very important thing to remind us all. And I will not do it again, I promise.
So just to look at their 2019 net sales, this is in billions. You can see that agriculture was their top performing segment, and then construction next. And we will see that in the upcoming years that construction will gain traction due to their acquisition with Wirtgen. And also we're hoping that with the rebuild of the economy that'll be coming up over the next few years due to the recent closure, that will also skyrocket. And then if we take a look at by their markets that they serve, one issue that we'll discuss at the end is that they don't have a large enough footprint worldwide. And so you can see that North America is where they primarily do most of their business. And then it just kind of trickles down from there, which is where we can see that they need to expand their footprint and learn how to better serve those markets.
Yeah, if we add Canada, we get North America at almost 19 billion. And then if you add Europe, which is also a mature market, suddenly we're at 24 out of 33. You can do the math, but Deere really doesn't have a whole lot of business in what we would call developing markets, does it?
No, sir.
So this shows what it's required to meet their needs. They need a strong dealer community. They need excellent customer service, diverse product portfolio, product innovation, automation, mechanical and process engineering, and strong financial position to meet the needs of their customers.
Hello?
Yes,
Who's going to talk about economics?
I think Jordy's
I think the next is, yeah, Jordy. So we're going to go over the environmental assessment, which is the economics and the sectors.
Okay.
Okay, so learning what John Deere manufactures, we've touched on this a lot. They manufacture agricultural, construction, forestry, machinery. diesel engines, drivetrains, which includes axles, transmission, and gearboxes, and then the lawn care equipment.
Okay, so these are some of the economic indicators, such as the GDP, employment figures, either inflation or consumer spending with like construction, building, or building of new homes, and interest rates. These are currently being affected due to what's going on globally. So I would expect for their sales probably next year to probably be a little bit different versus this past year's, just because of what's going on that worldwide. And hopefully it'll take some time, but as like we said earlier, as the economy's rebuilding, they'll see an influx in their numbers again.
Yeah, today new home starts in the first quarter were announced and they were down 15%. That's a dramatic drop. The anticipation for next quarter is for new home starts to drop 30%. So the coronavirus is clearly having an effect. Jordy?
So the first analytic model that we're going to use is the country risk assessment. So why this is important to John Deere is John Deere would use this model in any country that they plan on trying to do business in to consider both the economic risk and or potential of that country. So in this model, I'm not going to specifically go through every number, but you see, what's in black and what's in red. And you see for the United States, we kind of did them in order. So we've got United States, China, and Europe on this slide, and India and Brazil on the next slide. But we're able to see their GDP growth, their inflation of each country, whether their budget is balanced or imbalanced, and their current account balance and public debt. Yeah. So for the United States, as you see, compared to the other countries on this slide, their public debt is significantly higher. So we did 2017, 2018, and 2019. I went ahead and changed to the 2019 for their public debt to 140%. And I did that because with the recent economic stimulus, it added $6 to $7 trillion to their public debt. And so where they would have been at about 106% for 2019, for 2020, that's going to put them at about 140% public debt, which is very significant.
It sure is. Good for you. Good for you for updating this.
So for China, specifically compared to the United States, that you see that their public debt is significantly lower. So that's definitely a lot more favorable. And Europe, which is one of the most mature markets, their public debt is a little bit higher than China, but their inflation is low and their current account balance is low. So next. So
we sometimes have a hard time criticizing our own country, but no doubt about it, this is kind of I guess a scary or a situation of concern when we're looking at these numbers for the U.S., the current account balance, the budget balance, for sure that debt. And lo and behold, I believe it was Moody's that has lowered the rating on U.S. debt from A+ to A. It would not be surprising if it lowered U.S. and other countries' debt yet again.
So in this slide, we've got India and Brazil, which is other major countries that John Deere is in. So you see that India has extremely high growth compared to a lot of the other countries. And Brazil is probably one of the slowest growing. You see it's all the way down to 0.8. The inflation is extremely high, same as India. But their public debt isn't, much higher than Europe. Next. It
is, and one thing we can see, and that is the budget balance. Spending more than incomes, 3 1/3% more than GDP in India, but in Brazil, Wow, 7% more. 7% doesn't seem like a big percent, but if you do that every year, pretty soon it becomes very difficult to get that back into balance. And of course, that is a contributor to economic and financial risk.
All right, so the takeaways from the country risk assessment for John Deere is for each of the countries, it says United States is favorable, which that might change, but it has a very imbalanced budget, and the current account balance in the public debt is really high. And as Dr. Roney stated, the IMF lowered their credit rating from an A+ to an A. And in Europe, it's a very favorable market, probably one of the most mature markets, very stable, moderate growth. China has a favorable and stable, but they have rapid growth and low current account balance and public debt. India is much less favorable, very unstable, high growth, government preference to local corporations versus corporations, from other countries. A lot of corruption and high inflation and interest rates. Brazil, that was the most unfavorable. Low growth rate, it was the lowest of all of them, but had very high inflation and has a lot of political instability.
Yeah, the key words for India and Brazil are unstable. Lots of reasons such as corruption and so forth, but the reason, of course, we do risk assessment is because and this work is actually done in corporations. It's done a lot more comprehensively than our little review here. But depending upon the results of the assessment, a company will or will not be willing to invest in a country. For instance, to spend $50, $100, $150 million to build a new plant. If they're afraid that the country is going to nationalize foreign assets, which has happened in India as well as Saudi Arabia, for instance, if that's a possibility, obviously a corporation is not going to want to make an investment there. And this is the case in Brazil, simply because in Brazil, things have been changed. I believe we're on president number 4 in year number 5. So very difficult for Brazil to put in place a stable government. And without a stable government, company can't feel secure in making an investment. So these are important considerations.
Okay, so here we're looking at the GDP in terms of purchasing power parity. As we can see that the US GDP looks higher than India, Brazil, and Germany. But if you look at the first slide, it's US versus China. Since 2013, China's GDP has gone way above US. And what this indicates is that China has high level of production and high level of wealth. And India is also rising if you look at the second chart, US versus India. So what this indicates for John Deere is that they might have success in India, in China, but I know even though that the India is an unstable or not less favorable because of their political situation, I guess, but still in terms of when we look at their GDP, since it's growing, John Deere might have success in China and India because of their high level of wealth of production.
Yeah, we saw that chart earlier that showed the proportion of John Deere sales in developed versus undeveloped or developing countries. And Deere, for some reason, hasn't been successful in getting in to these fast-growing countries. And when we look at this chart with China versus the US, we're reminded that Deere really has to figure that problem out, or its status as a leading manufacture in these industries may be questionable.
So here we're looking at the unemployment rate, U.S., in China, in Russia, and in India. So they're all in the range of 4 to 5%. The China is doing better than United States. We're here at 4%, and China is at 3.8%. And what this unemployment rate indicates is it indicates the inefficient economy, and it contributes to a lower spending. So lower the unemployment rate, the better it is for the country.
Of course, with the coronavirus, we're going to see some big changes here, won't we?
Right. Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yes. Unfortunately, that's going to happen. And this is the gross debt. And if you look from 2010 to 2020, it has just doubled, which is not good, because higher debt can impact the economy, stability, value of the currency, economic growth, and the unemployment. So it's just sad that the debt is kind
And
of
we're going to see this go up.
grow up.
You know, this sort of tops out at $30 trillion, but we know there's at least another 6 trillion that's already been passed by legislation, and there was because of these add-ons, it's more like 7 trillion. So just take this scale and extend it up to 37 trillion, and bend this line to that level by 2021 or 2020. And, you know, this line's going to look a lot different pretty soon, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. And this chart shows the gross domestic savings. And you can see in purple, China has the highest savings, followed by India. And then US is on third, and then the Brazil. This is important chart because it indicates nation's wealth in terms of savings, and which will eventually leads to investment. So the savings can be a source of borrowing for governments for infrastructure expansion. And because infrastructure expansion involves highway constructions, it can be very helpful for a company like John Deere to understand each country's economy for global expansion.
Yeah, gross domestic saving includes corporate profit as well
Yes,
as
which we're
personal saving. And I know you know that, Niraj, but I don't think you mentioned it. So for the benefit of everybody else, you know, and by the way, these are as proportions of GDP, but still pretty relevant. So corporate profit, of course, is liquid money that's recently earned. Savings, of course, are again liquid. So this is capital that is available to be invested in the infrastructure or the interior of the nation if the nation's management wants to invest in the infrastructure, the highways, whatever you want to call it. And you can see the top line is China, and right below it, India. But what this says to us is that we can understand now why the highways and railroads, the interior of China has grown so rapidly, and that is because the financial resources to make those investments has been readily available. And that brings to mind then India. We see that India may not be the size of China, but it's a whole lot higher than the others. And so we can sort of anticipate that India's interior growth rate will will be high, if not accelerate. And in fact, that's exactly what's happening.
And this is the consumer spending. And as we can see in this chart, is that the China and India has higher spending than U.S. Maybe it's because of their higher gross domestic savings, and these are all based off of their individual countries' currency. For example, it's measured in U.S. Dollar, China yuan, and India rupees.
Yeah, the dollars are on the left, right?
On the left.
And the
Yes.
right scale are the foreign countries. So China's numbers on the right, and India's rupees are on the right.
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah. Interesting in that China's growth of consumer spending has been comparable to growth in the U.S. India's has too, but it's been a little lumpier, and it appears not to have grown quite as fast as the U.S. But interesting chart because it gives us this comparison.
And this is the inflation rate between China and U.S. and China. And U.S. has, most of U.S. has always had the lower inflation rate than China. But if you look in between 2016 and mid of 2018, the inflation rate in the United States was higher than China. It's pretty interesting. Maybe it's because of the high oil price during that time. I'm not quite sure. But during that time, mid 2016 and mid 2018, the inflation was in US was higher than China, and it's always good to have lower inflation rate because it increases the value of the money.
Yeah, we want to make sure not to confuse interest and inflation.
Frankly,
inflation drives interest rates, so you were right no matter what word you used. But these are inflation rates, and as we can see, the y-axis isn't none of these measures after 2000, I guess 13 or 14 is very scary. So I think we could describe these as relatively controlled inflation.
And this is the new home construction. It shows in the chart that it's been growing, so which is good for John Deere because of its involvement in construction business. So, but now I think because of the current situations, we might see it going down, unfortunately.
Yeah, we know it because of that report we just got.
Sure. Right. So, yeah, that's just going to be bad. And construction spending, as you can see, it has been fairly in the same ratio, but it has been decreasing, as you can see. And obviously it's going to decrease more because of the COVID.
Yeah, and of course economists can get pretty good at forecasting these. Sometimes statistically you can see we've got a little cycle here, but to the extent that we anticipate construction, and of course we have to be more specific than that. There's residential, commercial, industrial, municipal, defense construction. So and each of them is a little different, but to the extent that we can anticipate construction, then Deere can get ready with its marketing and its manufacturing resources. On the other hand, if we anticipate a downturn such as occurred here, then Deere needs to pull in its horns and be careful not to build so much inventory that it ties its capital up and reduces its rates of return.
So here, this is the interest rate trend, and thank you for to Dr. Ronnie for providing me this chart. So the interest rate has been going down here in the U.S. as we can see, and it's good for businesses because it prompts businesses to take out more loans, and so that they can hire more people and expand their production. So basically the lower interest is better because it impacts the consumer spending and the economy of the country.
Yeah.
And,
I guess at one time there were labels on this. This is the very short-term interest rate, the so-called prime rate. This one is, I guess, for 2 years. This one's for 5 years, and this one's for 10 years. But they also have the same pattern, don't they? And recently, it has been less costly to borrow money, and that if you get the loan, if you get the financing, then let's say that that the interest rate is 3%, and you can get an 18% return on invested capital. That's not bad, is it? It costs you 3, you get 18, you give the bank back its 3, and you keep the 15. You do that all day long, won't you? As long as your leverage doesn't get too high.
yes, sir. And this is the interest rate in China. Their interest rate has remained pretty much the same, and looks like since end of 2015 it hasn't changed, and it has stayed in 4.35%.
Even though inflation and economic activity has changed, here we have a managed economy. So the government manages it, even though if interest rates were allowed to fluctuate with economic activity, we wouldn't have the straight line, right? There are good parts and bad parts of this, but the one thing we can say for sure is this is not natural. This is not the way economies behave.
No.
Here, this is more natural.
Right. So this is the India's interest rate, and theirs are higher. And just trying to show the difference between each country's what their interest rates are. So this is just to show that India has their interest rate has remained at 9.4% since last year.
That's pretty high. The real question is, what is the term? We don't know whether this is short-term, mid-term, long-term. It would certainly help us to know that.
Right.
You know the term of this by any chance?
So, well, this is the personal loan interest rate. So I'm assuming it's not a long-term.
Okay. So if we had long-term interest rates, those rates might be even higher to provide for the added risk of of a longer-term commitment.
That's possible.
Yeah.
And as you can see, Brazil has even more. I guess the picture got cut off. It's like in the 40s, 50s.
Hey, can I get a? What do you think? Should I go to Brazil and get a loan? What do you think?
No.
In order to do well in Brazil right now, if I borrow money in order to buy machinery and equipment, I got to get a return on it of maybe 55 or 60%. A little difficult to do that, so probably going to pass that.
Right.
Okay.
And this is the U.S. savings rate, and it seems that the household savings has increased to 8.4% last month. No, I'm sorry, in February. That was in the chart. But I'm assuming it's going to increase more because of the situations. People are not going to spend more. Because, right now, I mean, the situation is that we don't know what's going to happen. People are losing their jobs. And so it's kind of like unknown future at this time. So people are, I think I'm assuming that this rate is going to go up just to, because people are not going to spend more because of uncertainty of the future.
I'm sorry, did I flip it too quick?
No, you're fine.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, so the Industrial Production Index, as you can see, it's been growing since 1970. And what this tells us, it's a monthly economic indicator, and it measures the real output in the manufacturing, mining, electric and gas industries. And it provides the important input about the economic output right now. And the next slide, number 60, is the capacity utilization rate. And you can see it's has been all over the place, but it's at 77%. And what this is, it refers to the manufacturing and production capabilities that are being utilized by the nation. It's the relationship between the output produced with the given resources and the potential output that can be produced if the capacity was fully used. So the higher the capacity utilization, the lower the cost per unit, which allows a business to gain an edge over its competitors.
And I almost had that, didn't I? But we can see it's cyclical, and recently we've had an abundance of capacity. So what would this say to you if you were making manufacturing machinery, by way of example, rather than construction machinery? That there's plenty of machinery there, there's lots of capacity. So if capacity utilization were up over 80%, maybe we'd be thinking, or 85, we'd be thinking that there's a need for new capacity, new machinery and equipment. But at the current rate of 77%, chances are that there's not a whole lot of demand for new machinery and equipment. So those industries might not be likely to employ more people, by way of example.
Okay, so this shows the U.S. corporate profit, and it has been fairly doing well. I mean, it's been in the same range, and it's going up. But it's I'm not sure because of the current situation what's going to happen. But basically, this chart is important because the higher the profit, the corporate profit, it's helpful for the economy and the employment.
Yeah. So that's that corporate profits that we talk about in net gross national saving. And so in the US, this has been very helpful. But again, now that we're looking at the coronavirus situation, chances are that'll turn back down again. But the point here, I think, is that we as corporate profits and other indicators of economic health improve, that tends to drive demand for food, shelter, cars, highways, and so forth. So all these indicators are relevant to Deere, especially when we take them as a whole. And they will be again. The reason it's helpful to go ahead and look at these, even though we're in this stage where the coronavirus is going to upset things, that upset won't last forever. And when we get back to whatever we return to, or whatever happens after the coronavirus, we'll have to do this same kind of analysis again. So this is a good drill just to let us know what kind of variables are looked at and how to look at them.
So in conclusion, based on the charts and data information that we had.
I'm sorry, I've got us all screwed up here. There we go.
Okay. So just based on the charts and data that we had shown earlier, so we can say that the U.S. is in a pretty stable, good economy condition. However, we might see a drop due to the current pandemic. But there will be a recovery programs, and once there is a recovery programs, it will lead to an infrastructure development, which is good for a company like John Deere because of its involvement in construction company. And also low interest rate in US and Europe means easier capital expenditure of agriculture, construction equipment, and forestry equipments. And we also see that there's a potential in growth in developing countries.
Yeah, and that's especially important to Deere because Deere has good, strong market shares in mature markets. Where Deere has to get its growth act together is in those developing economies.
So next we're going to look at the markets, and that'll just go over who the buyers are as well as the industry production and revenue profits that they receive.
Okay, so pretty much the buyers are going to be those who operate in their segments, the agriculture, the lawn and garden, golf and sports turf, construction, landscaping and grounds care, forestry, engine, and drivetrain. The target group is going to be the customers that are willing to pay higher prices because of their quality, their excellence, and the reliability of their products. The positioning is the same. Deere has never outgrown or forgotten its founders' original core values, which determine the way they work, the quality they offer, and the unsurpassed treatment you get as a customer.
Remember my little metaphor about doing Abell's model with that college that had all those high-priced professors? Here we are again. You know, Deere is not looking to sell to contractors or farmers, or for that matter, homeowners who want the cheap product, are they?
Nope.
Instead, the target group, you got it just right. You know, Deere aims at people who have the ability to buy better quality products, assuming that they can convince those people that the products in fact are better in quality. But they're certainly not, this is not the stuff that you're going to buy at Ace Hardware, is it?
No.
Okay. This is a better quality of product.
And they do that by going to other buyers, which are the ones that own a dealership, becoming a supplier, or providing licensed products. And here you can see their products, the turf, the large ag, the small ag. And we just wanted to show the net sales by product category in 2019, just to show you kind of where that spread is. And then that's on the left. And then on the right, you got the construction and the forestry. You see it's 11.5 billion, construction being the huge part of that.
Yeah, and road building's really made a difference, hasn't it?
Yes.
And this is a pretty interesting pie chart. It shows the net sales and revenues from each countries or each continents. And as we can see that both in 2018 and 2019, the highest revenue was from United States. And what it tells, or what it indicates, is that John Deere has an opportunity for improvement in those other parts of the continents, and especially in China, where the economy is really strong. So right now, the John Deere is in dependence of the U.S. market. So through acquisition, they can expand its market share in those other developing countries or in other continents.
Okay. If you just take a look, we've got 52 in the US and 6 in Canada, so that's 58. If we add 15 more, what do we got? 73. So 3/4 of Deere's sales are in what we would call mature markets. Only about a quarter is in these other locations. Clearly that's Deere's challenge. It needs to expand this wedge here. And that is a challenge.
And there is an opportunity to, if they look at it, if they can expand
Yeah.
there.
The next 3 slides are just going over a couple of the very important commodities for John Deere. This first one being the steel price trends. If you look at it, you can see over the last 5 years, steel was on the rise, and then it started to drop a little bit. Now, of course, due to the coronavirus outbreak, it's going to reduce even more. It's expected to fall 25% this year.
Wow.
With everything going on, which is going to be huge.
Yeah. Why is this important?
This is important because whenever the prices drop, that makes the cost come down for John Deere, as far as what the cost they have involved in building the machines. They keep their prices the same as far as what they sell them for, so that's more profit in their pocket.
Yeah. Deere's 2 most important costs are steel and labor. Labor usually doesn't go down, but steel fluctuates, as we can see. And steel price trends are extremely important, not just for Deere's profit margins, for their pricing decisions too.
And if that happens, coming up 25%, I mean, 25% is huge.
Oh boy, it sure is.
Okay, so this is the crude oil price. That's also an important commodity for them. And it's also, been dropping as well because of the American oil production is offsetting the OPEC production cut. This causes traders to bid the price of oil down. The OPEC deal cut the oil production of the OPEC and 11 other participating countries by 1.8 million barrels of oil a day.
Mm-hmm.
And look at gas, just the regular gas for us. Look at it right now.
Hooray!
Really dropped.
Okay, what's happening here is the result. I don't know, I would expect that everybody's aware of this, but there's been a battle between Russia, which is one of the major producers of oil in the world, particularly for Europe, and Saudi Arabia and OPEC, the Arab oil producing countries, but especially Saudi Arabia. And both of them would like to see the American oil producers go out of business, particularly those that are doing fracking, that are drilling what are called shallow deposits in Texas and Pennsylvania and so forth. As a result of those guys, the U.S. has gotten to the point where it's producing as much oil as other regions, but when we produce it in those shallow wells, it's a lot more costly. So the cost of oil in those shallow wells may be about $30 per barrel. The cost of oil produced by OPEC is about $6 or $7 per barrel. So OPEC and to a somewhat higher level, Russia can produce oil and sell it at a relatively low price. And so when OPEC and Russia got into a squabble and both started to produce a lot of oil, the result was that we produced a lot more oil than is demanded. And that oil is being stored in ships. By the way, I'm being attacked in no uncertain terms. I'm sorry. This is Waffles. you've all met Waffles, I presume, and he insists on getting his ransom. So, and then he'll go. But Waffles does not take no for an answer. He's been pestering the hell out of me every night.
About the same time.
Oh, he's predictable. Sit. And then he'll go. I'm sorry. Realize this is now going out to cyberspace. So I think with all these videos we're doing, Waffles is probably a well-known personality in cyberspace. Okay. So anyway, you know, the price of oil has gone down because we've got just so much of it. And there is a theory that actually Russia and Saudi Arabia, without saying so, have actually sort of colluded with the intent of producing oil at such a low price that it just can't be met by the frackers, you know, the narrow, the shallow drillers in the United States, thereby forcing them out of business. But whatever their motives may be, by producing all of this oil, the result has been a dramatic reduction in price. The problem is that the American onshore rather than offshore oil drillers cannot produce it at the recent prices were $10 a barrel. Today, oil enjoyed a nice kick up to $17 a barrel. But if it costs the drillers onshore in the US 30 bucks a barrel, it's still going to be kind of hard for them to sell at 17 and make a profit, isn't it? So that's the issue we're in. In any event, there's a lot of oil floating around in the world right now, and I do mean floating. It's on ships, and it's being stored in the ships. So you're going to be able to buy gasoline at a nice low price for quite a while to come.
And the last commodity that I'm going to touch on is the rubber. The rubber prices, they've also been dropping over the last 10 years. This is due to an overabundant amount of rubber that's available. And as we all know, if supply exceeds demand, then there is a price drop.
And again, I did it. I'm sorry I flipped it so fast.
It's okay. I'm finished.
Okay. Next, we'll go into industry structure. Just some basic stuff would be the BCG matrix and life cycle, as well as the 5 forces and success factors.
Okay.
So here we're looking at the financial information of John Deere's rival company. And this is one of the rival company, Deere Co. And they are entirely agricultural equipment. They do not do constructions. And we're just looking at the chart that shows their sales from 2010 through the forecast of 2024. And we're going to talk more about this in the later slides as well.
Okay.
So basically, yeah, yes, sir. So we're just going to compare side by side with here. We're just trying to show what their sales.
We see some relatively low profit margins here and low rates of return. That may be relevant later.
Yes, sir. And the same thing. This is the CNH, the other competitor or a rival company of John Deere, and they are both in agriculture and construction.
A little bit larger than Ag Co. Little higher profit margins. Rates of return are still not very impressive.
Right, and I think you have also pointed this out that And if you look at their, it goes back to 2013, not 2010, because I believe it got independent, or it was with.
Oh, are you trying to get to the merger between
Right,
Case and
with,
New Holland? Case
correct,
makes, yeah,
right,
Case makes agricultural equipment. New Holland, which is located in Holland in Europe, makes construction equipment. And so Case New Holland got together and merged. And so this is a multinational corporation for sure that is like Deere. It makes both construction and agricultural equipment because the two companies in different countries make that each type of equipment.
right. And we're going to see the comparison in the later slide. Yes, sir. And this is the Caterpillar. They are the largest company, and they are entirely in construction. So they don't do the agricultural equipment.
Right.
And their sales are pretty high. Obviously, it's a big company, and but their leverage is also really high.
So are their profit margins, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
And this is comments. They're not a big competitor for John Deere. They are basically, I believe that they mostly deals with the truck engines and parts.
Yeah, they make diesel engines. So does Deere and so does Caterpillar. So you put them into the mix here, but they are kind of a tangential competitor because Deere really doesn't sell a whole lot of, they do sell diesel engines commercially, but primarily diesel engines exist at Deere for vertical integration. Deere makes their own diesel engines.
Right. So this is the comparison of Deere versus their rival company. So if we look at the sales, Deere is actually doing pretty well. And obviously the Caterpillar has the more sales because of its scale economy. Their higher volume, higher the profit. But if you look at their leverage, I mean, it's pretty high too. So compared to all these other rival companies, we can see that the John Deere is doing really good. And we can say that Deere can be strategic competitive because of its leverage. It's a very good company to invest in.
Yeah, so because Deere's leverage is low, if it wanted to go try to grab market share from CNH in some particular market for construction or agriculture, with this low leverage and with CNH having high leverage, if Deere were real aggressive and made a move in the market, maybe by building a factory in a particular location, an undeveloped developing nation perhaps, where CNH wanted to be also, Deere could do it, and it wouldn't strain. It wouldn't be under any financial stress. If Deere, but if CNH tried to match it, then that would challenge CNH financially because it's already got such high leverage. It could be an unacceptable risk to CNH, and therefore CNH would have to stand to the side and watch Deere take that position. So with low leverage, a company can be strategically aggressive, and that's what Niraj has stated for us in this note at the bottom.
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Yeah.
Okay, so looking at their BCG matrix, starting in the cash cows, we will see the golf and sports turf as well as lawn and garden, which are two of the most consumer industries that they have. Those would fall under there. Next, engines and drivetrains. Truly, that could be bumped up into ventures more so, just because that's something that they are also not necessarily new in, but it's not as prominent like you had stated earlier. They kind of within each other. It's not one of their main segments. The ventures that we've stated, construction and forestry, just because of the acquisitions with the working group and timberjack, especially construction. We'll see that in the next couple of years, probably move over to a star, and possibly forestry as well. And of course, we've got agriculture as a star. And when we look at the CSF report card, we'll go over the success factors that make that as a star as well. And that really falls due to not only their reputation, but customer loyalty as well.
Well done, Mallory.
Thank you. So we did the life cycle based again on their segments. You'll notice that none of them are on the decline phase just because we feel like they are strategic in the segments that they're in. And none of them are going anywhere anytime soon. But again, back to the construction, that's going to be on the rise as well. And then they're all the other segments just fall out right below it. So none of them we don't foresee going anywhere anytime soon.
I think one of the nice things about this chart is that nothing is in decline.
Yeah. So into their technology, John Deere is really known for their technology that they have on their equipment. So for precision ag, this is just the basic stuff, not basic, but it's really high tech that the farmers can use. They can keep up with their location of their equipment, their hours, the service needed. And then for use, it can track, say how many acres it's covered, or the precision plant, if the plant's gone in, the soil that is needed for that plant, or the soil tested soil that is planted in. And it just really helps them work remotely as well. Into the construction segment, JD Link Telematics, that keeps up with all of the equipment under one project. Again, it can keep up with if a piece of equipment is running, if it needs to be serviced, and it keeps up with the position that it's in on a project. And then the payload weighing, that could help for the construction. So when they're not wasting on buying gravel or dirt, it can help measure what's needed. And then as it picks it up, it measures what's in the loader. And so they're not wasting. So that's really beneficial for the companies that use it. And then into forestry, we've got Timbermatic Maps and Timber Manager. The maps do a topographical area of the location that they're working in, and it can pretty much track what they're doing. And then as the project moves along, the equipment can communicate to each other pretty much, and it kind of helps keep the project on track so there's not a delay or a waste of time. So it can tell which equipment is needed next.
I don't know where you got that photograph or that picture, but it is really slick with the satellite talking to all those things.
All right, so next we did the Porter's National Diamond for John Deere's agricultural equipment. And this model is very relevant to John Deere because it looks at which economies are able to support or is most favorable to that specific industry. So for this one, we did the different countries. With the scoring with the Porter's Diamond, the highest scores are more favorable, which is in opposition to the 5 forces. So, we look at the different segments of this. You got the factor conditions, which is the land, labor, and the materials, the demand conditions, which is the extent to which demand is satisfactory to invest. And then you got rivalry, and then the related and supporting industries.
So based on your analysis, you found North America to be, the North American economy to be most supportive of agriculture, and India to be least supportive. Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
And that's the problem. That's we talked about this as a team before, but I'll repeat it for the benefit of our audience. Here's India, this great big country that soon will have more people than China. That'll be the most populous nation in the world. It's got quite a lot of agribusiness, very unsophisticated agribusiness, but it's got problems. It's got corruption. Its highways are not well developed. Its inflation rates are high. Its unemployment rates are high. The training and education of the people who do work is not terribly high either. And so, you know, there's a great deal of incentive to get in on the ground floor of India, because we know there will be a day when when India's economy is greater than China's, which means it'll be greater than the US economy too. That won't happen right away though. It's gonna be a long time before that happens, but it's gonna happen. So there's an incentive to get into India. And then we look at an analysis like this and we see all this stuff that says, but not yet. We remember we looked at the risk analysis. This is not yet. So part of the incentives, part of our motivation is a tug to get in on the ground floor. And the other motivation is, yeah, but it's risky and messy, and the national economy doesn't support this industry, and yuck. Yeah, so you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. It's a real enigma. An enigma is an unsolved problem, right? An unsolvable problem. India, for this industry and industries like it, is an enigma. It's an unsolvable problem, and it drives people nuts.
All right, so now we're going to do the Porter's 5 forces analysis.
Why do we do Porter's 5 forces analysis?
To assess the profit potential based upon the 5 factors.
Yes, that's exactly correct.
I think you've driven that point home. So with this, John Deere's industry structure, I did kind of a 5 forces summary. You know, rivalries high in that industry, threats of new interest are low, threats of substitutes are low, supplier power is moderate, and buyer power is moderate to working on the high side.
Yeah, so how would you characterize the profit potential of this industry?
Well, it's low. I say not really low. There's other factors.
Sort of moderate. Yeah, the one thing for sure is that if rivalry is high, we know that both differentiation and low cost are required. You have to offer customers something that they're willing to buy rather than your competitor, but they have to be able to afford it, and you have to make it affordable. And here we have buyer power, and it's a 4. It's not a 5, but it's a 4. And what this says is that the buyers can go elsewhere to other dealers. Now, what would have made this analysis even more interesting? And I think we're going to see that, and that is how it differs between countries, right? Yeah, there we are.
Yeah. So we did the 3 main segments. We did the agricultural, forestry, and the construction. And you see, you know, rivalry is pretty high in the analysis.
Anything else?
So no, the videos were blocking out all the numbers, the people's videos. So in North America, for agriculture, the North America and China is the highest, and Europe, India, and Brazil are all pretty equally scored. In the forestry division, the numbers aren't too much different for all of them, but the United States, or North America, United States and Canada, India and China are equal, and then Europe is 4th and Brazil is the low. So that would show that that would be the most favorable. And then in construction, the North America is the highest, and Europe and Brazil is the lowest.
Yeah, we have to remember that high, when these forces are high, these are the forces that push profit down. So a more attractive country is one that has relatively low scores. Now, different experts, of course, would rate these things differently. So we're not too concerned about the individual scores of the individual countries, except to point out that as you have, and a good example is forestry, there's really not a lot of difference between these countries' profit potentials for forestry equipment. You know, by and large, with possibly the difference in construction, it looks like North America, if this analysis were correct, would have the most forces that push profit down, higher to make a profit in construction equipment in North America, assuming this is correct, than in Europe, where the forces ostensibly, and Brazil, which is a little hard to believe, but in Europe, the forces aren't as substantial. So if an analyst at John Deere did this analysis, they might go eventually be making a recommendation to management to try to sell more construction equipment in Europe, because for these reasons, and it looks like threat of new entrants, the low power of suppliers, and the absence of substitutes, it would be attractive to be in the European construction equipment industry, because if you can do good business there, you can make good profits. And so this is one piece, along with all these other models, that helps us put together a picture of just how attractive it would be to enter into a particular country's market to manufacture and sell this equipment that Deere offers.
All right, so next we're going to go through each of the 5 forces. So we know that rivalry is high, with its largest competitors being AGCO, Caterpillar, CNH, Kubota, and Toro. But most of John Deere's competitors have specific segments in the industry that they focus on, like Caterpillar is construction, John Deere is agricultural, and Toro is landscaping. But out of the several hundred tractor and agricultural equipment companies, those top 4 generate over half of all of the revenue. Next. So the bargaining power of suppliers, we had that one at moderate. So John Deere has kind of created their own supply channels, which reduces the risk of the suppliers driving up their cost. The expansive consumer they are an expansive consumer of steel and rubber materials. So their suppliers of steel, metal, and aluminum is U.S. Steel, Rio Tinto, and Alcon. And then the suppliers for rubber is Michelin and Bridgestone. Next. So the bargaining powers of buyer, we had that as high. You know, consumers, they have an easy ability to switch if they're unsatisfied with the products. The best machinery provides a high return on their investment, and the consumers want that dependable, reliable product, and they're willing to pay that higher price for that product.
Just very quickly, and again, I'm inserting this because it might be on the test. Is it easy for customers to switch? Let's say we've got a construction company, and they want to switch from John Deere to another brand. First of all, they have a huge inventory of repair and maintenance parts, right? All sorts, and they're all over the world. And they've got mechanics who have been trained in John Deere equipment and John Deere diesel engines, right? And they're not the same as the equipment and the structure of other companies' equipment. So if we were to switch, we'd have to retrain all those mechanics, wouldn't we? We'd probably also have to retrain our operators in how to make use of this stuff on the highway or on the farm or whatever. So one issue Now, you know, there are some cases where you're absolutely right. It's easy to switch. For instance, it's easy to switch lawn and garden equipment and the equipment that we repair golf courses with and so forth, and small tractors. On the other hand, if we're talking about cotton balers and combines and great big heavy tractors, then there's what's called a switching cost. And that it's when we have a situation like Deere with this great big sophisticated equipment, that once a company decides it's going to be a John Deere equipment user, there's a certain cost of switching, and that protects John Deere, doesn't it? It helps them maintain their market share. So for those of you who might want to become business analysts and asset intensive industries, switching cost is a pretty important consideration.
All right, so the threat of new entrants for John Deere is low. It's high entry cost, switching cost, brand loyalty to large companies, and it requires extremely large capital to invest. And then there's a heavy government regulation in the emerging markets such as China and India.
Okay.
The threat of substitutes is low. As Dr. Roney has wrote home, the substitute for a tractor is a plow behind a mule.
Right.
Specialized products, specialized market, most consumers who own the farms, commercial businesses prefer to use the same product for maintenance and dealer assistance. And as he said, there isn't many substitutes for a plow except a better plow.
Yeah. Or a mule. Did I go too far? Yeah,
To the
okay.
next one for the conclusion. Okay. All right, so the Porter's 5 forces conclusions, profit potential for John Deere comes from their maturest market, North America, and emerging markets such as India and China. The price competition between the top rivals is low since competition is centered on overall value instead of price.
That's good.
Deere's strategy of producing high quality and reliable farm equipment and providing the farmers with high values of customer service has reduced switching. John Deere's engineering capabilities and metallurgy is not easily substituted, and the technology and heavy equipment, machinery, as well as its operations will strengthen their positions to fend off the substitutes.
Okay, good.
So the product life cycle analysis, as Valerie did earlier, we kind of took it through the different stages with the different products that John Deere has. So in the early stages, then embryonic stages, we got the OnLink, the 8-track tractor, which is the tractors with actual tracks, not the wheels, and then the Blue River technology. And then as we head up the growth stages, you got Workden, the new cotton picker combine that poops out the cotton already wrapped. And then heading into the growth to the mature, you got the Timberjack. And then you've got the mature phase, which is the LT series lawnmowers, the Gator vehicles, and the 8000 series tractor, which those have been around for a while, but they still sell high numbers. And then not fully on the decline, but the mature to the decline is the smaller tractors, the compact utility 790 series.
Yeah. Assuming that the small tractors are declining, why might that be?
Well, they have so many different options out there now, and trying to reduce labor. The smaller tractors doesn't have the technology that the later ones have.
Yeah. Another reason, of course, is I'm not sure whether we bring it out here or we're going to later, but what we see is fewer farms as small farms are sold to agribusinesses. And so over time, we've got fewer and fewer farms and bigger farms. And those big farms use big equipment. They also become much more difficult for Deere to deal with because when they buy fleets instead of individual tractors, they can drive a harder bargain, can't they? But in any event, because we've got more of the great big agribusinesses, those corporations don't buy as many small tractors as the family farm used to.
So the critical success factors, that is which functional capabilities distinguish winners from losers. I'm not going to read all of them.
Good idea.
We got the design engineering, the metallurgy, and then you got the logistics, the precision planning and harvesting, and some favorable government relations such as regulations, patents, and so forth. The
point is that there are functional capabilities that do distinguish winners from losers. And, you know, if a company is going to be a winner like Deere, it's going to have to be strong in these capabilities, stronger than its rivals.
So now we're going to go into our capability analysis. This will just go over the financial trends, our report card, strengths and weaknesses, as well as global operations.
So here we're looking at John Deere's financial trends from 2010 through 2020. We're going to talk more about this in the later slides.
Okay.
But looks like the 2013 and 2000. No, you're fine. I was just going to point out that the 2013 and 2019 has been a good year for John Deere, and this is the one like we had before, the pie chart where it shows the 50% of the sales comes from U.S. For John Deere, and that's what we're trying to show here, that most revenue, if we compare, 50% of the revenue comes from U.S. and China.
You can do a little exercise. Frankly, earlier today, there was another presentation of the John Deere case. What we did is we added these two numbers here, and we found out that the outside U.S. was 39%, and down here it was 38.5% or something like that. But essentially, Deere typically has had very little change. 60% in U.S. and Canada. That's before, of course, we add in Europe and the mature nations. And then, as you and I already realized, it was something like 75% in the mature. But 60-40, 60-40. When the John Deere's sales increased, the proportion outside the U.S. went down. It went down to about 36%, and the part in the U.S. and Canada was 64%. So we drew quite an interesting conclusion, and that is that generally speaking, Deere's mix geographically hasn't changed very much. It's 60-40, 60 U.S. and, call it North America. And 40 outside North America. But when there's growth, it doesn't come outside North America. It comes from within North America, which is not a compliment to Deere's international marketing acumen, is it? And somebody's smart, two smart people, Mallory and Christie, are writing the notes because they can bet that there's going to be a question on that. Smart people. Okay. Yeah. So the takeaway is not a lot of change here. For all this time and all this strategy, not a hell of a lot of improvement. Deere has got lots of smart people. They've got a lot of smart people. A very capable company. And yet for all those smarts, where's the improvement? And
They have always been independent with the U.S. market.
Yeah, but you know, if you're having a meeting with the board of directors at Moline with John Deere, or you're a securities analyst, or you're a strategic planner at Deere, the real issue is what I just described to you. You know, Deere is having a hard time getting out of the rut, and it needs to get out of the rut and get into the developing economies and the developing markets. And for all of its effort and all of its skill and all of its technology, all of which is impressive, it hasn't gotten out of the rut.
So here we're looking at sales of each companies, and we see that the sales for John Deere is going up, whereas all the other companies are going down. But the important thing, what's interesting about this chart is, if you look from 2000, especially 2014, where that the small arrow is pointed at, all the industry sales were going down at that time for the agricultural, the companies that are involved in agriculture and the construction equipment. And that is basically because due to the decrease of price, the price decline in corn and soybean during that time. And so the price drop on soybeans and corn means less cash for farmers to spend. And also, there was also a big drop in oil price, copper price, coal, and iron prices during that time, which means there was less drilling. So that also, and because of there's less drilling and less exploration activity, that was the reason why the sales in mining equipments were decreased. It's kind of interesting that how all these companies' sales went down during that period of time.
Yeah, and it occurred to all these companies, not just Deere.
Right, not just John Deere, no sir. And the operating margin is in a pretty good percent for John Deere compared to others. It's in the 12% ratio margin. But John Deere, but Caterpillar, if you look at it, it's higher, and the reason is because of the scale economy. The Caterpillar is a big company, so the big volume, big profit. That's the reason. So
yeah, John Deere is a muscle company. Great big, like you say, scale economy. They can buy at discounts from their suppliers. They've got stuff that nobody else has. They'd just be the 10,000-pound gorilla in the construction equipment industry.
Right.
And so their profit margin shows it.
Shows it, right? And this just needs to lower their operating costs, I guess, John Deere, so that they can increase their OPM. But anyways, this is the rate of return on each company, and it seems that John Deere has a pretty good rate of return in compared to other.
Very good, 20%.
20%, yes, sir. It's pretty good.
Yeah. What and here we have the operating margin.
Yeah.
Now, don't blink. See, they're the same chart. They're the same pattern, aren't they? Okay, so these rates of return are driven by the profit. It's as simple as that.
Right.
So is that one. Did you blink?
Right,
You missed it. Gotta look closely. They're the same charts, and it's driven by profitability.
Yes.
Okay. Oh,
and
these are
here
good.
we're looking at the leverage, the risk, very important for investors.
Yeah.
And we're looking at, for John Deere, about 33%, close to 33%, which is better than other rivals. And if you look at CNS, like we have talked about this earlier in the slides before, from 2013 to 2019, there was a big drop from 85% to 65%, and that was because it became independent. I believe that was the main reason why it was, because of its, they were with the Fiat, I believe, correct?
I think CNH sold the division.
Sold it, right,
and
that's
took the proceeds and paid down debt. Even after that, 2/3 of their capital is from debt, as opposed to 1/3 at Deere. So if Deere wants to be aggressive in competing against CNH, with that kind of a difference in financial risk, it probably could do so.
Right. So basically, I mean, it is still, the John Deere is a best company to invest in if anybody is interested, because of the leverage is not being too high.
Okay.
And this is the financial trend. So this is just a summary. John Deere reported $34.8 million sales in 2019. Their OPM and ROI decreased by 1.6% and 1.9%. And that was mainly due to the high operating costs and deterioration of net income. And the next slide will show the return on equity, which grew by 2.95%, which is better than their rivals. So we also see that the leverage for John Deere has been lower, which is, like I said earlier, it's a good company to put investment in.
Okay.
Okay, so this is their CSF report card. It just basically kind of weighs out their strengths compared to their competitors. And the factors that we weighed out were their research and development, product differentiation, and their metallurgy. And we gave Deere all 5 just because they are the top competitor. They have the technology that's needed to be successful, as well as an array of products. And underneath all their equipment, their equipment holds up because of the engineering and the science behind their seals. And then next would be a tie between Case and Cat, with AGCO kind of behind them, just because they're not as developed in other segments as the other 3 are.
Yeah, and whether somebody else has a different point of view or not isn't the case. We're not metallurgists or experts in what kind of research and development Case New Holland does. The point simply is that we need to do a critical success factor analysis in order to identify where potentially we need to do better in order to be an effective competitor, and where potentially our adversaries are so weak that we could attack them. AGCO in this case doesn't look very strong in product differentiation. So if that's true, our salespeople in the field, wherever, unique product strengths have to be present in order for a piece of equipment to really perform its mission in the farm or construction project. We're going to emphasize that in order to beat AGCO out.
So John
AGCO
Deere
doesn't make construction equipment. I'm sorry. They make agricultural equipment. Sorry.
It's okay. These are some strengths of John Deere. Of course, there's tons more with them being as strong of a company as they are, but a couple important ones are their diverse product portfolio, their R&D and product innovation, the mechanical engineering, process engineering, their financing capabilities, and their diesel engine manufacturing. All those make them very strong.
As Christy touched on the strengths, some of John Deere's weaknesses is very limited global penetration, as we said multiple times throughout this PowerPoint. They need to work on selling products at a lower price, whether offer discounts or incentives, developing the eco-friendly products at a lower cost. And then, uncontrollable forces that kind of works against them, the economics, the weather, crop prices, the limited penetration in the markets with the heavy government preference for local businesses such as China and India.
May I have your permission to edit one of your bullets?
Yes.
Please. Need to sell products at a lower price by offering discounts. We don't offer discounts. Our products are severe producing by lowering manufacturing costs and increasing we don't make cheap product. We're good manufacturers, and that's how we got our costs down, right? So then we can sell at a lower price. Okay, is that all right? Will you forgive me for doing that? Okay. This isn't Kmart.
All right, so now we're gonna go over their markets, the global locations. And as you can see here, this kind of just goes over the major equipment factory investments all over the world. But in the slides coming up, we'll break it down a little more.
Oh.
All right, so the first region is the Southeast Asia and South Africa. And I picked out, I just kind of went through all of them, picked out some areas that I thought were good to point out. So you see, I'm trying to move my mouse. Move. Number 60 is the Singapore. That's down there at the bottom. And that's their power systems marketing and construction and forestry. And then number 67, that's the Bangkok location. In Thailand, that's going to be the marketing there. And you move up north and you got the number 20, which is Beijing, China. That's their operations office. Number 24 is going to be right under that. That's going to be the ag tractors, the loaders, hydraulic excavators, and so forth. It's also a distribution center for the China parts. And you go all the way over to the left, and that's going to be the India ag tractor location. Okay. So you see that leaves a lot of room for opportunity.
It sure does. But Deere's got their operations well located. Number 60 down there at the bottom in Singapore. Is there anything? I mean, Singapore is not a very big place. It's just a city. What is it that makes that location interesting? We've got access to the Southeast Pacific, right? We've got Southeast Asia, Indonesia, the Philippines, and so forth. So I think the reason we're in Singapore is, again, back to country risk. Very low country risk, very stable financially, politically, socially. The country's government welcomes industry and so forth. And from Singapore, we can serve this entire Southeast Asia region. So, Deere has done a good job in locating these things. Again, if they've done such a good job, why can't they do a larger amount of business in these regions?
Okay, so we've got region 2. This is the Europe and Middle East. And you can see it's kind of clustered over there. I wish, can we come in closer or not? Number 25, that's going to be the Finland, the forestry harvesters and forwarders and harvesting heads. Then number 65, you got Sweden. That's the parts distribution. Number 41 is your Germany location, which is the milling machines, the recyclers, and the Wortgen headquarters. And then number 30 is France with the credit operations and ag marketing. And number 58 is Moscow, Russia. That's got your marketing training centers, ag tractors, and your Eurasia parts distribution center. The region 3, this is South and Central America. You can see in number 4, that's going to be Argentina.
Oh,
It's the engines and components.
whoops.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Region 4 seems to be Australia.
No, region 3, number 4.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's all right. All right, so the number 4 in region 3 is the Argentina, the engines and components, regional parts distribution. And then the number 7, that's kind of at the midway to the right. It's going to be Brazil with your computer software and South American parts distribution center. Number 19, which is going to be over to the left on the coast. It's going to be the Chile Credit Operations Center. And then number 52, which is way up north, is going to be in, I don't know if I'm saying this right, Arizpe. Correct me if I'm wrong.
No idea.
All right. Well, that's going to be your tractor mounted loaders, your hydraulic cylinders, utility tractor loaders, and other components.
Okay.
And your 4th region, that is US and Australia. And number 1, I had to point that out. That is the Moline, Illinois, the headquarters, the tech center, construction and forestry marketing, hydraulic center, cylinders, and so forth.
Everything.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's the big old headquarters there, and you see there's tons of locations. They're all over, which we've talked about throughout this whole PowerPoint.
Yep.
US is eat up with it. But I did pick out a couple. Number 5, which is the Australia Credit Operations, the Ag and Power Systems, and then number 56 in New Zealand, which is the Forestry Harvest headers and the Marketing Center.
So this is a global company, isn't it?
Yes. And this is their financial services. You can see it supports the global growth.
And again, spread out just about everywhere.
That's correct.
Okay, so then we're going to go into our goals. This will just go over what their financial goals may be, as well as their competitive position, and the goals hierarchy, excuse me.
Okay.
All right, so on the goals hierarchy, you can see the precision ag, and the construction equipment. It's kind of in between the excellent financial and then the favorable market. And the lawn and garden, the ag equipment and the forestry, they're the leaders, long-term growth there.
Okay, for market position, we can first compare the agriculture, and John Deere, as we know, is the leader in that. And then following closely behind, not closely, but would be Case, and then right behind Case would be Ag Co. And these are in billions, and like I said, John Deere is way ahead in that segment for it. Then we'll look at construction for their market position. As we do know, and we're aware that John Deere is not the leader in this, Caterpillar is, but again, with their acquisition in 2017, we're hoping that they will be able to close that gap, if not go above it, with Caterpillar. And then Case is not as heavy in the construction equipment, but they do have it.
Back to the goals. Somehow I got my slide switched, but I was just touching on where they lead at. So the forestry, Deere's acquired company, Timberjack, is the world's leader. The lawn and garden, John Deere is the leader there, and the agriculture equipment, John Deere is also the leader there.
Okay, so I guess this really wanted to be with a goals hierarchy, huh?
Yeah, thank you.
So now here we're looking at the financial goal table. So as I think the picture did. I don't know, Dr. Ronnie, if there's a way you can move the picture, because what we're trying to show here is that their sales will increase by 15%, which you can't actually see because of the picture. So 15% is the increase in sales, and there will be a decrease of 18% in long-term debt, and 12.4% leverage will decrease by 2024. So there are three things that we can take away from this, is that they have a capacity to compete, they are strategically aggressive, and they have has a competitive advantage due to their lower leverage.
Okay, that was a little rough. I think the goals hierarchy, the goals table can be summarized just by looking at these differences that Niraj has put on in yellow, nice and readable. So sales, we're going to go up about 15% in 5 years, which is a nice steady growth. We're going to go up about $5 billion. Nice growth. Operating margin's going to get better. That's good. We need a little bit of a boost there. If you're talking about a change of 0.1%, that's essentially negligible. The return on equity comes down a little bit because it's really hard to grow net worth at 28% a year, which is what 2019 was. So if we drop down to 24%, none of the shareholders are really going to gripe too much. Growing shareholder wealth at 24% would still be moving along at a nice clip. Going to drop debt by about $1 billion. That's a great idea. Equity, look at that. You see, sales go up 15%, but shareholder wealth goes up 57%, right? That's pretty good leverage. That's really good. So our sales went up 15%, but because we generated earnings and retained them, our shareholders' equity is going to pop 57%. That's really good. The shareholders will just be grinning it from ear to ear. And yet, while all this is going on, leverage, as though even though we don't really need to drop our long-term debt anymore, because we do, leverage goes from 1/3 to 20%. And what that means, as Niraj pointed out, is that with 20% leverage, if Deere decides to get aggressive in any respect strategically, it certainly will have the financial capacity to do so. So, this is a great big, if you could put a great big smiley face right on this chart. This chart is grinning. It's the shareholders are happy, management's happy, the salespeople are happy, everybody's happy. This is a very happy goals table.
It is, yes, sir. And this just shows the goal to achieve would be, again, it got cut off by the, I don't know if you all can see the number, 40.
The annual steps.
Right.
This is the annual detail from the goals table.
Right. So their goal is to increase sales and to reduce their long-term debt and leverage.
And increase shareholders' equity.
equity, and then the operating margin, which is
Right.
by lowering their operating cost.
Right. Okay.
Yes, sir. And this is just the
Are the
graph.
graphs that show how we're going to get there,
How
right?
it's going to get there. Yes, sir.
Okay. So
It's just a pattern where it's going.
sales, operating margin, all smiling
Mhm.
graphs.
Yeah. So everything is going up except for long-term debt and the leverage.
Smiling charts, all very happy charts.
Okay, so I think this is our last segment. We're gonna go into strategy, which will go, no, I think we have one more after this. But anyways, we're gonna look over horizontal, vertical integration, as well as unrelated diversification and the AMSOF growth matrix.
Whoops.
All right, so the John Deere strategy here, obviously they've said over and over is committed to those linked to the land. So what they aspire to do is, global agricultural equipment solutions, being a global leader in construction equipment and outpacing industry in growth. They've tried to do an integrated enterprise where they leverage their strengths and their capabilities with the different types of businesses, which is the global growth business, the complementary businesses, and supporting businesses.
So Deere has published that it wants a 15% operating margin. Let's see what value line projected. 14.5. I guess we'll take it, right? That's pretty close.
All right, next.
So this is their slogan for strategy, which is run smart, run fast, and run lean. Basically, just being first in creating smart and innovative customer solutions through technology and expansion their global coverage on all their businesses, and then drive financial returns by maximizing employee performance and
What does
reducing.
run lean mean?
It means
What does
that,
what does it mean if somebody is lean?
so it means you're trying to be very efficient.
You're not real fat, right? Somebody who's lean isn't very fat. Okay, so run lean means be real productive and efficient and use your assets well and don't pile up unneeded assets. Run lean, fast. Don't get lazy.
All right, so John Deere's generic objectives is, they've pretty much used the differentiation and the low-cost strategy. So some of their objectives would be find ways to produce at a lower cost, and they can do that through, automation in their factories, driving a hard bargain with their suppliers, through vertical integration, so manufacturing more parts internally versus purchasing from suppliers, and unfortunately, different countries operate in different ways. So their strategy in China might not work for India. So it'll be a very individualized strategy for their market.
Right, and we call this hybrid because it's a combination of differentiation and low cost, right? Yes?
Yes.
Okay.
All right, so John Deere's global strategy, which they call it the refreshed global strategy, they came out with this in 2017, and it's pretty much just trying to integrate their global growth, complementary and supporting businesses, focusing on the future for sustainability and eco-friendly products and operations. A lot of these countries, such as China and industry, have heavy regulations on emissions and things like that, and continuing to be very innovative and having global growth to develop advanced technologies and products that support their sustainability.
Yeah, so we've got all these neat words. Okay, just all these neat words. See if I can possibly just pick them up. I don't want to delay us very long at all because this thing is really going a long time. And I guess I may or may not be able to do it. We'll take one more shot. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so we've got global, we've got China and India. All this stuff is good. But in spite of all that, you know, the what really hurts is that we're paying attention to this stuff, but it's just not turning out in the wash. I'm going to have to excuse myself for just a minute. Pardon me. I'll be right back. You may want to do the same thing.
Almost done.
How many total slides do we have? Do you remember, Mallory?
39.
39, right? Okay.
I'm so sorry. Do we advance the slide here?
Yes, you did.
Okay.
All right, so John Deere needs a focused heavy growth needed for construction, agriculture, and forestry to due to an increase in the infrastructure, mass urbanization in countries such as India, and productions, automation to improve quality and efficiency in operations through manufacturing and equipment automation, growth through innovation and disciplined global expansion, to increase their presence and create stronger branding opportunities outside of North America, and then create opportunity to leverage itself more when negotiating contracts with international suppliers.
Okay.
All right, next we have the ANTOS growth matrix. So previously we looked at, what elements of the industries are supported, and then we moved into the adequate potential, profit potential, and what forces needed to be dealt with. So here, once we're in the market, we have the formula.
Jordy, it won't be necessary to read everything on this slide if you don't want to. I think a whole lot of what's on the slide we've seen previously. But what we need to remember is that this is a slide that summarizes the approach that Deere has taken in the past to grow. It's been the growth strategy. Or, and normally we present two of these. One summarizes what's been done in the past. Another summarizes what will be done in the future, the growth strategy. But we can simply take a look at this and be made aware of just how much has been done in the past strategically to grow. Maybe you want to identify some of the highlights, but certainly don't feel compelled to discuss every one.
Okay. So one of the biggest, or some of the biggest things for John Deere in the coming years is going to be locating their factories and dealers close to their markets. Development of their workforce in the different regions. So through their market development and their new markets, growing in forestry, and countries such as India being able to counter their government preference to local brands, and let's see, product development, through heavy acquisitions and mergers with big countries, big companies, and then growing their smart technology to improve both their GPS and data analytics and sustainable energy diesel products.
In the product development, those are all things that have been done, aren't they?
Mm-hmm.
And in product proliferation, more or less, those are things that are being done. Automated tractors, precision farming, and so forth. Where is the most important part on this exhibit? Market development, right? Yeah?
Yes.
Sure, because that's what Deere has to do. It's got to get into these markets that it hasn't been as successful in, even though it has worked its fanny off to do so. Working hard is one thing. Getting results is something else. Okay.
I'll just briefly run through this. Their complementary and supporting businesses help drive their performance in the global growth platform, both Timberjack and the Working Group. They need to focus on gaining the market share in construction sectors for where global markets or their competitors hold a larger share. And then their growth potential in both domestic and global markets and agricultural due to specialized geographical needs.
Yeah, probably this word is where. And so we were talking about low leverage and the ability to be strategically aggressive, and this is something that sort of fits that. And it's what Deere has to do.
All right, so their horizontal integration and related diversification. John Deere has demonstrated that by purchasing companies, obviously not in the same industry, but has the same competencies, construction equipment. Those companies are Timberjack and Working, and then reducing their cost of products across the segments due to scope economy, which leads to
Scale economy.
Scale economy.
Yeah,
Yes.
so Timberjack and Wirtgen aren't the same as the agricultural and current construction equipment, but they're tracked. They use diesel engines. They use plate steel. These products can actually be made in the same plants that Deere already has. Although they purchased companies that had plants, it's easy to take some of those products and move them into Deere's existing operations that may not be completely full. And so we call this scope economy because we're going to spread out the administrative and management expenses, the accounting department, auditing, all the legal expenses, the top corporate management. But as we go through the process of integrating Timberjack and Wirtgen, we'll actually be able to enjoy some scale economies as we fold those operations into existing operations too. So scope economy is one way to get scale economy.
All right, and vertical integration. John Deere does that with their diesel engines, their precision planning and cultivation, and their GPS and artificial intelligence navigation systems.
Okay.
Unrelated diversification. John Deere does that with their turf maintenance and lawn maintenance segments. That whole segment is kind of completely different than the rest. It's in the consumer market instead of the industrial market. They don't have tracks, they have wheels, and they don't have the diesel engines as well as the plate steel. They use the sheet steel.
Right.
Okay, so for implementation priorities, we're going to discuss the major products and programs, safety policies, new skills and capabilities required to do this, as well as an organizational structure change and leadership changes. Go ahead, sorry.
Yeah,
I'm not going to read all of this, but just kind of the overall, this is kind of what John Deere has done, like a comprehensive plan to address both the environmental,
sure.
health, and safety policy.
When they're implementing their strategy, there are certain things that just have to be paid attention to, such as safety, regulatory compliance, and so forth. So this is one of those things that that Deere has to take care of when it's implementing its strategy. Okay.
So to be successful in what we think they need to do, which is to expand their footprint throughout other areas of the world, we said they need to first enter the new markets. And if they're already in them, then they need to go to the next one, which would be to establish the division committee that is needed in that area, whether it be agriculture, the forestry or construction and the credit area, and then pick which area they need to expand that in. And we'll go over those as well.
Okay, we flipped from here to here. You said go to the next one. Is this?
I mean, like,
is this an explanation of that?
Yes, I mean, as if they were already in that market, then they would go to the next level of establishing which committee needed to be expanded on. I'm sorry.
Is this where you want us to be?
135.
Slide 135.
Sorry?
135.
135. I'm sorry.
You're fine. So then the areas that we think that they could expand on or increase their footprint would be India, Brazil, Africa, and the UK, just based on the needs for that area, whether it be population or the lack of growth in their areas with new markets and emerging industries.
Okay. Mallory, is this you?
Yes.
Who's talking? Okay, your picture was frozen and we couldn't see who was talking. Okay.
Oh, sorry.
Now we
Right.
see you.
Okay, so now that we're almost at the end of our presentation, I'm just going to go real quick about the skills and capabilities required to implement strategy. So this is basically some sort of a recommendation about what they need to follow in the future. Innovate, number one would be innovate new technology, because as time changes, company would need to spend more in new technologies like artificial intelligence and sophisticated metallurgy. The most important is expand products in global market. That's very, very important for them. And they would also need to put some more focus on construction and forestry segments, because of an increase in the population and recovery programs, the world might see more, or the world will actually see more construction in the future. So just put more focus on construction and forestry segments, besides the agriculture, and acquire more companies to control market share and develop growth.
Yeah. The title of the slide is New Skills and Capabilities that are required to implement the strategy. I don't think I see any on this slide, but what kind of skill and capabilities will be essential for management to make this very aggressive international strategy happen? What sort of skills and capabilities will be needed?
So I would suggest implement, acquire companies to control market share, and for them also to implement, become more socially responsible.
Yeah. Frankly, this is a very difficult question. One for sure is the ability to negotiate with foreign governments, government relations. Certainly another is the kind of engineering that is able to develop sophisticated technology, this micro farming and so forth. These are all good points, but it's certainly the John Deere is going to have capabilities to implement this strategy to get international. And among other things, I suppose that its skills and capabilities in highway construction with Wirtgen to really exploit that capability in the markets that they want to expand into outside the ones that they're already in. But in any event, I'm just struck by the fact that we've got this title, New Skills and Capabilities. And I think, you know, we need to think about that. Let's see, we move to the next slide, do we?
We can, sir. So basically, like I said, this is just our recommendation for them, what they need to be, what is required, you know, to implement their strategy. Mm-hmm. And so they would need to establish standards and targets, which can be measured, compare their performance against their target, evaluate the results, and take corrective actions as necessary.
Yeah. One of the things that you've mentioned earlier in the way of capabilities is the organization structure too. You know, is John Deere organized adequately to make a successful encroachment into these developing markets? Oh, okay, that's it, we're done. Hey, what do you know? Finally. That was a long one. I'm going to stop the recording real quick. To be honest with you, I'm really concerned